We have a new chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee with Republicans taking control in John McCain, and we have a new chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. This is something that you have spent a significant period of your career on, whether it's procurement reform, whether it's sort of dealing with unconventional threats, particularly in recent years. Is this a unique opportunity here? Final 2 years of President Obama's term, Ashton Carter, a guy who is sort of versed in some of, I don't want to say the minutia, but certainly versed in the way in which some of the things you're talking about, how the Pentagon works, how it can work better. McCain, obviously a very high-profile figure, can draw attention to issues that he wants to. Is this a moment for your priorities, do you think, and how do you get it done?
Yeah. People who have followed this more closely and longer than I have think that it is a unique opportunity, partly because of Secretary-to-be Carter,
right.
Deputy Secretary of Work Frank Kendall, and again, on a bipartisan basis in the House and the Senate. It's not just McCain and I. It's on both sides. Adam Smith, the ranking member on our committee, we're joined at the hip on these things. So I do think that the necessity of doing it now, plus the relative nonpartisanship of
a rarity,
issue, yeah,
right?
Gives us a chance to do something. But back to your earlier point, there is still cultural resistance to change.
Right.
And so the other thing I'm really struck by in history is it is hard for the Pentagon to change without Congress making it change. So I think that for us, we have great partners so far over in the Pentagon, but the impetus, the requirement to make it change has to come from Congress or it doesn't happen.
I want to talk about procurement in particular and sort of your approach to reforming the process, because in reading on it, you gave a speech at AEI recently, sort of last month, outlining your sort of broad vision
Yep.
for the chairmanship, and you talked a lot about it. And we were talking before, and Senator McCain, the Senate Armed Services Committee chairman, certainly seems on board with this. These are not the immigration, the big high-profile fights in many ways, which, as we were saying, may give it a chance to actually succeed in Congress. But do you worry about it being drowned out by some of these, I don't want to say sexier topics because that's not the right word, but topics that draw more of the attention, that are more high-profile, and how do you avoid that happening?
It doesn't worry me too much.
Okay.
So you have all this flack on some of these high-profile, more partisan issues, but I believe that there is widespread agreement among Republicans and Democrats on the Hill, in the House and the Senate, people in the Pentagon, industry, think tanks, that our current system is inadequate for the times. And so these systematic changes that are in some ways more fundamental, in some ways more boring, I think there's so much agreement that we've got to do better that I think it can get done. And one of the key points to me is it's not just about saving money. It's about how do we help our system be more agile to respond to a very volatile world. I mean, if it continues to take us 20 plus years to field a new fighter as fast as technology changes, we will never be able to catch up. And that example of how quick technology changes, but also how quick the world changes, back to the use of these groups' use of social media, terrorist groups of social media, we have got to be more agile in order to meet our national security responsibilities.
Now, you mentioned it's not just about saving money.
Yeah.
We're living under the sequester, something that you've spoken out, and said this doesn't make a lot of sense. President Obama put a budget out that sort of ignored the sequester at some level and said, I think it's time to let it pass. But you are a member, and a very prominent member of a party that has succeeded politically for a number of years, saying we need to shrink government. We need to shrink the size of government. How do those two priorities, how do you make the case, as you say, it's not just about the money being saved here. How do you make that case to your fellow Republicans?
Yeah, just one side note, we haven't really shrunk government. If you look at the budget today, it's bigger than it was last year, which is bigger than it was the year before.
It hasn't grown as fast.
It may not have grown as fast. It has not shrunk.
Right, fair.
But the reason is, and this is key, is the 2/3 of the federal budget, which is mandatory spending, has continued unabated, basically. So what has happened are the discretionary programs, defense, which is now about 16% of the federal budget, has absorbed 50% of the cuts under sequestration. And then the other part of domestic discretionary, medical research, a lot of key things, has also been hurt. So I think part of I think what folks on our side would say is the deficits have not gone away. They're dramatically better than they were, but any of the estimates are that they return again here in just a couple of years. So you can't say, okay, deficits don't matter anymore. But on the other hand, this blindly cutting across the board on discretionary programs is just dumb and harmful. And it has certainly been harmful in the case of our military. If there's one thing, it seems to me, that is Congress could do to help with innovation, getting more competition and so forth, it is some degree of budget stability rather than what we've been doing, roughly a 21% cut in real terms in the defense budget since 2010. That's really hard, not only for the big guys, but especially for the smaller guys to stay in the market when things are going down so fast.